This is also a way to not just protect my time and energy in abstract form, but also protect my freedom, protect my sovereignty.
When I really fully understood what permissionless money means, it changed everything. When you think about money and what it actually is, it's just simply an abstracted form or an abstracted expression of our time. And when you pull back the layer on that a little bit, you go, well, what is time? What is the essence of time? This is the only money in the world that you can store and give to somebody else or receive without having to rely on the permission or participation of a third party. Australians are leading the world in censorship. Where is the first place the government can apply force and influence in your life or your money? If you're a self-custodied Bitcoiner, though, you can just say, you know what, I'm out, jump on a plane, and you're good to go. You can take your economic value with you everywhere, and you cannot be censored.
Essentially, being our own bank is what Bitcoin enables us to do. We all of a sudden are able to stand a little taller and feel a little freer. Today, I'm excited to have with me fellow Aussie Bitcoiner, entrepreneur, and co-founder of Unemployable Media. Now, if you're a regular Aussie listener, this man will need no introduction. Of course, Mr. Adam Hudson, who has been one of the driving forces behind Unemployable Media, one of the fastest growing business and media podcasts here in Australia. Adam has a fascinating backstory. He actually left the country, many of you will know, within the last 12 months, and he's a real freedom maximalist. And so today I really want to get into why Adam sees Bitcoin as such a powerful freedom and self-sovereignty tool. I think you're going to get a lot out of this conversation. I was on Adam's show a little earlier this year, The Sat Signal. Check it out if you haven't already on YouTube. And we covered a lot of ground, and we got a lot of really positive feedback from that particular show. So I'm looking to, I guess, extend that conversation with you, Adam. I really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy man. Really looking forward to the chat here today, and I know that viewers are going to get great insight from this conversation. Now, before we get started, guys, if you want to support the work that I'm doing, support this show, one of the best things you can do is to leave a comment, like, share the episode, and of course, most importantly, to subscribe. When you subscribe to the channel, you help me to attract world-class guests such as Adam and others to really help you further your Bitcoin education, further your Bitcoin journey. Adam, welcome, mate. Great to be talking to a fellow Aussie. How's things on your end?
Zane, good to see you, mate. Nice to be here. I love being on Bitcoin shows, and especially Aussie ones. So it's good to be here, mate. And mate, can't wait to dive in and see what you wanna chat about.
Awesome, mate. I think many of the audience will be quite familiar with, your take on all things Bitcoin, but I really want to get into the freedom side of things here today, Adam. But what I'd love to know right up front is, with your business background, and I tuned into that long form conversation you had recently on your channel, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, where essentially it was this is your life for Adam Hudson. That friend of yours did such a tremendous job of really, I guess, hosting that particular show. But it was just, I think, really great to get to know you at a deeper level. But what I'm really curious to know, for the benefit of myself and the audience here today, how has Bitcoin changed the way you think about life and business?
Well, it's a great question. You know, like all people with Bitcoin, I came for the money, or what I perceived would be a great investment. You know, buy it today, sell it tomorrow for more. But what I discovered actually was much, much more the more I went down that rabbit hole. And when I really fully understood what permissionless money means, it changed everything. And it made me realize how much we do in fact live in a matrix. And everybody knows the analogy of the frog in the boiling water. You know, you put the frog in when the water's cold and gently heat it up, and you can boil it. But if you throw it in, when it's boiling, it'll jump right out. That is so true for everybody, particularly living in the West. And money is just one of those things that, you know, when you think about money and what it actually is, it's just simply, as Jack Muller says, an abstracted form or an abstracted expression of our time. And when you pull back the layer on that a little bit, you go, well, what is time? What is the essence of time to each of us? And when you really go deep on that, it's very simple. It's actually literally your life. It is the one spiritual, sacred thing that you have been given that is above all else. It is above law and liberty and justice. It is your sacred essence that somehow got breathed into your lungs. And I know you just had your first grandchild and you're reminded of this sovereignty and the beauty and the specialness of life. And so when we go to work each day and we get these tokens called money, when you start to think about what happens after that and you discover Bitcoin, you realize this is the only money in the world that you can store and give to somebody else or receive without having to rely on the permission or participation of a third party. That is profound. Whereas most of the world get their time, their life force, give it to a corporation to look after, who charge
Yes.
you fees on your life force and then print away the tokens that they swapped you for it, thereby stealing from you. So you then have to ask permission from the bank to get your money back. Now, most times they'll grant permission. You just put the card in the wall and you pull out the tokens again, which are structurally worth less because the inflationary system we live in absolutely relies on inflation, or theft is another way of saying it. So we live in a structurally impaired environment that actually relies on theft. And so when you start to realize that Bitcoin is the only way to store your time and energy without needing permission that can't be printed away, it's a bit of a head F, to say the least, but it's also profoundly liberating. And it makes you then look at all other areas of life where you are being taken from, lied to, affected.
Yeah, I really like that. And I guess this is the side of Bitcoin, Adam, that probably requires more education. Like you said, we all come here originally because we think that it's, we see the growth rate. We start to learn that it's the best performing asset of all time. And we start to learn about things like compound annual growth rate, which I'd never really heard of before I came into Bitcoin. And so you get kind of initiated into this capital growth and wealth creation mindset. But it's then the longer you're in Bitcoin, the more you start going down this other rabbit hole, which is, well, hang on, this is also a way to not just protect my time and energy in abstract form, but to also protect my freedom, protect my sovereignty. And so, Adam, I know that, I think you've got well over 100,000 followers on Instagram. And, if you look at your profile, you refer to yourself as a freedom maximalist. Maybe for the audience, just if you can just sort of articulate why you see Bitcoin as such an important freedom tool. Why should Aussies in particular, because most of our audience is are Aussies who are looking at this asset and they're thinking to themselves, should I buy it now? Am I too late? You know, all of these what if scenarios. But why should people be paying attention to Bitcoin beyond the number go up side of things?
Great question. And I love this line of questioning. So Australia is leading the world in censorship. And
Mm.
I don't want Australians to really hear what I just said. Australians are leading the world in censorship. We are the first nation in the world to attempt and fail, by the look of it at the moment, to censor young people off large parts of the internet. Now, I don't think any Australians would disagree that protecting young people from the toxic nature of social media is a bad thing. I think most Australians agree with that. But is that really the agenda? Or is it to bring in a digital ID where they face scan everybody so that they can watch what we click on, what we like, what we say online? And if it doesn't toe the line, do they want to intervene and do what legislators do and legislate and, do what the UK has done and put people in jail for, Facebook comments or whatever else? And the thing is that if you look at the world, the countries that have allowed open and free debate and free speech are the ones that have thrived. Those that have repressed free speech and tried to control that area of humanity have failed in comparison. Those that have risen, the life that Australians enjoyed is the result of a system where people are free to say what they want to say. And as Elon Musk says, it only really matters when you're willing to defend the right of somebody who you profoundly disagree with. So if you don't agree with what the government is doing, or you don't agree, if you think back to COVID, you think of the amount of rubbish that was jammed down everybody's throats and literally into their veins. And the people who spoke out about it were silenced, shamed, penalized, socially thrown to the wolves. It was a disgusting blight on Australian history, dividing Australians up with arbitrary lines and kids being born that their grandparents couldn't see. Terrible, terrible time. And those who spoke out were put through that. Now, I see a world coming to Australia where if you say what you think about any number of issues that is, they deem to be, I think there's a word for it now. I think the legislation coming in next year is causing social unrest or, leading to civil disorder or some governmental term. Where is the first place the government can apply force and influence in your life? Or your money. Number one, right? For 99% of people, if they get cut off from their money for a very short period of time, it's like getting cut off from oxygen. So compliance is forced very quickly by freezing bank accounts. And so as a Bitcoiner who self-custodies, not one that leaves their tokens on exchanges because the government could just go to CoinSpot and say, hey, give us a list of all your Aussie customers. And then this Adam Hudson guy, we don't like him. He's causing social unrest. Cease transfers, and you don't have the keys because the exchange has the keys. They're holding them on your behalf. So it's not really your Bitcoin, it's theirs. In the same way, the money you put in National Australia Bank is their money. And, if you read the fine print, once you give it to them. So if you're a self-custodied Bitcoiner, though, you can just say, you know what, I'm out. Jump on a plane and you're good to go. You can take your economic value with you everywhere and you cannot be censored any more than they can censor the platforms where you want to speak. So that's just one example. But when you actually understand permissionless money and the ability to not rely on the National Australia Bank or rely on Commonwealth Bank or rely on an exchange or anything else to have economic power, it's very liberating.
If you're ready to become truly self-sovereign, join my Bitcoin Success Circle. This is my private mentorship community. And inside the circle, you'll get one-on-one coaching from me, access to our 6 modules of recorded training, and you'll be connected with our growing community of like-minded Bitcoiners. This is a really powerful place to be. And everybody who's joined the circle is absolutely delighted that they did. Now, when you join us inside the circle, you'll gain immediate access to our membership portal. And inside the portal, you'll find our 6 modules of recorded training. The first 3 modules I co-host with Mr. Bisha Kadira. He is COO, Chief Operating Officer at Stormrake. Second half of the training, I co-host that with Mr. Tony Yazbek. He is founder of the Bitcoin Way. So all of this is inside the program. I know you're absolutely going to love it and get tremendous value from it. With that said, I'd love for you to join me. You won't regret it, and I'll see you inside the circle. Yeah, absolutely. Do you think, Adam, there's still this underlying sense of complacency, though, when it comes to Aussies, even post-COVID? I mean, we just saw so many people during COVID that kind of just went along with whatever was being kind of dictated to them. And I mean, to add to what you were saying earlier, there were people who couldn't even go and earn a living anymore, right? If they didn't go and kowtow to the medical thing. But the point is that even post that, my concern is that Aussies are so laid back, right, for the most part. She'll be right, mate, is kind of built into our psyche. What do you think it's going to take for Aussies to kind of wake up and realise that this actually could happen to Australia? What you're saying, a situation where your money could be frozen, where you could be censored. I mean, do we just need to look at the Canadian truckers?
It's absolutely going to happen in Australia. There's no doubt in my mind that it could happen. It's going to happen. Right. I mean, they're saying quite a bit out loud now. They're telling us in plain language that these laws are coming to Australia, where if you say things online, look it up. They're coming in 2026. If you say things online that I can't remember the word, but I interviewed Big Chocky just recently, who's sort of blown up an Australian landscape. And we interviewed Sam from Two Worlds Collide. Those guys, a lot of their content, they're not going to be able to produce that without being deemed to be causing social unrest, what they
Right.
deem as social unrest. And if they
Yeah.
don't comply, if the platform doesn't comply, and X just, because Elon probably won't, Elon will probably cop the fine and let them put their content out. So then they'll come after them and say, listen, guys, sorry, but we are fining you. And if you don't pay, we'll censor your cash. They will cut off their bank accounts for sure, in my opinion.
Mm.
We saw it in the Canadian truckers. Money is just such an obvious means of getting people to comply, right? Just, sorry, we'll freeze your bank accounts. This person's a pending criminal or whatever. So yeah, Australians, unfortunately, are too rich. And what I mean by that is that we're so comfortable. And I can tell you, because earlier this year, I was on the streets of London with Tommy Robinson,
Mm. Mm.
and I marched with Tommy, and I interviewed dozens and dozens of British, what they call right-wing extremists, who were just grandmothers and family people who were just absolutely fed up with their country being lost to massive irresponsible immigration. And the country is their country now. Like, I don't know if you saw over the break, the takeover of the Westfield shopping centre with Palestinian flags and Islamists chanting Allah Akbar inside of London's central Westfield, and just outrageous things going on there, just totally outrageous. I interview these people and they're saying to me, Adam, I'm marching because if I want my grandkids to see this. And I said, what if you could go back 20 years in time? What would you tell yourself? And they said, stand up sooner and harder than we did, because the British were painfully polite and accommodating for the longest time. And their culture is gone or dying. It is being absolute. There was no Christmas trees in central London this year. There was no mention of Christmas throughout the city. Their own system of democracy has been used against them through a Cold War. And what I mean by a Cold War is there's no guns fired. They're just breeding them out of existence and putting Muslim people, and this is not anti-Muslim, because I love Muslims. I'm in a Muslim country. But when you bring, and it's not the Muslims are the problem, it's this extreme Islamist views, but when you breed, when the locals are not having kids, and in Muslim culture they're having lots of kids, obviously it's just math. Within 2 generations, they're going to be in control. And at one point in the last couple of years in London, 9 of the 12 council districts were led by Muslim leaders. And when you fundamentally change the foundational belief system governing a country, you change the country. And it's going to happen in Australia. And it's already happening in Australia. So, Australians need to wake up. I personally don't know that Australia is savable at this point. These numbers are not trivial. They brought in over 1 million people in the last 2 years, which is just outrageous. When you think about that, it's an Adelaide, who are these people? What do they believe? So anyway, so me speaking out about this stuff, I feel a lot more confident knowing that I have economic power stored in my own custody, right? And if I didn't, I'd be vulnerable.
So, guys, what Adam's really getting to here in a nutshell is that once we take control of our economic energy in a way that we've never been able to do before, which is self-custody Bitcoin. So essentially being our own bank is what Bitcoin enables us to do. We all of a sudden are able to stand a little taller and feel a little freer and feel like we have a little more optionality, because there's no risk in what happened to the Canadian truckers, where they had their GoFundMe accounts stopped, bank accounts frozen. There's no risk of that happening to somebody who has Bitcoin held in self-custody in a really optimum way. And so I guess the message here is, if you're sitting on the fence when it comes to Bitcoin, or you're only paying attention to the price, you need to start thinking a little bit more about Bitcoin in terms of its ability to give you optionality in terms of your financial life. Would you say that's a good summary there, Adam?
I think so. And I think the two are inextricably linked, because the question I would ask the listeners is, in the world that we all see, right? Like, in front of us in Australia. The average Australian right now is like, oh my God, like for the first time in my life, I'm really starting to pay attention to these bigger issues outside of
Mm.
Bitcoin and investment and whether Tesla shares are going up or down. They're starting to think about the bigger picture here. How many people in the world do you think want to have a reliable store of value that is permissionless store of value for their time and economic value in the marketplace? Given what's going on in the world, that the trust that is being drained out of traditional fiat currencies,
Mm.
how many people do you think in the world want an alternative, whether it's for all of their capital or just some of their capital, to have just the ability where they've got a rainy day fund, it might be $100,000 that is permissionless, right?
Mm.
It's the modern day version of under the mattress, right? How many people in the world do you think would want that? And then when you look at the two other remaining facts, which is that Bitcoin is still only $2 trillion in world
Market cap.
assets.
Mm.
It's a tiny, tiny, tiny piece. Most people still haven't woken up to this yet. And then you look at the fact that it's a limited supply. When you've got a limited supply asset and the world waking up to how corrupt the system is, and there's many countries where it's not optional, like there's places like Nigeria and South Africa, the adoption rate on using Bitcoin in day-to-day life is just skyrocketing. It's not a nice to have. They are converting their fiat currencies instantly into Bitcoin. When you think of those facts combined, do you think there's going to be more or less demand for Bitcoin going into the world that we're all staring down the barrel of? And I think the answer is overwhelmingly Bitcoin is the exit. Bitcoin is the life raft for so many people. But Australians, unfortunately, because we're so rich, they're just like, I need to know. I don't really need to know. I'm okay. National Australia Bank's not too bad. But they're always the last to care because they're the richest and most insulated from what's going on in the world.
Yeah, and I think, Adam, there are countries in the world probably that we can't necessarily easily relate to as Australians, but there are lots of examples in the last 20 years of countries whose banking systems has failed, their
I lived in
currencies
one,
have, yeah,
Cyprus. I live there. It's exactly what happened. Everyone got a haircut. They just took the money. Greece, same thing. Lebanon, yeah.
yeah. And so Aussies have got to kind of have this realization that, it's not us being conspiratorial or saying, trying to scare people into submission here. This is about just realizing that Bitcoin provides a solution. It came out on the back of a really chaotic time, being the global financial crisis. There's so much more debt in the system now than there was back in 2008. And, it's just something now that I think more and more people should be paying attention to, particularly when you consider what Adam's saying, that Australia is becoming a country where there's a lot more dictatorship. We're heading towards a socialist style of system. I mean, I think I heard you recently, Adam, is over 50% of the employees of the country are now semi-dependent on the government system.
Mate, we are a socialist country. We're not heading
Yeah.
there. And when I say this, it's an article in the Financial Review that more than 50% of Australian voters either have a government job or rely on a government handout as their principal form of income. So when you've crossed that Rubicon and you got more than 50% of the voting public essentially standing next to the money printer, right? Like meaning that their vested interest is in how much the government is going to give them directly. So politics becomes a game of who's going to give the biggest amount of money for free at the expense of the other people who are working in private enterprise. That's it.
And where does the money come from?
Where does the money come from? It comes from mostly in Australia, the small business men and women and some big corporates, and it's being mismanaged to buggery in Australia. And, it's just an absolute travesty. Australia should be like the Middle East in those countries where if you're an Emirati, you get a handout because of the resources and wealth in the country. I recently had a cigar with an Emirati in Boracay where I was having a quick vacation for a week. And we sat there on the sand smoking a Cuban. And I said, can I ask you a serious question? I said, how do you and your brothers and sisters. He's a Muslim guy. We had a really interesting chat about, because I wanted to know like some of the extreme stuff out of the Quran. I had the real chat with him. It was a really awesome chat. It was great because they don't have they're a full Muslim country, but they don't have the extremist problems. They've got a great country and they're Muslim, which is amazing. Aussies, our government should be on the phone to them saying, how can we have that? Right? Anyway, I said to them, mate, how do you guys feel about your government? And they said, we feel about our government how a father treats a child that they love. We feel like that child with a father that loves us. And
Wow.
I nearly choked on my cigar. I was thinking of Albo and how Australians would describe their government. And it's not just Albo, it's pretty much any from either
Yeah.
side of the aisle. No Australian would ever dream of describing a politician, period, like that. But this is normal for them because they don't have a democracy. They have a ruling class that looks after them. And it's just interesting. And then every time I mention this, and you'll see it in the comments below, well, how do they look after their immigrants? And I'm like, I don't give a damn because they're ruling for their people, right? It's not that I don't give a damn. Of course, I care about human rights and all those things. But the point is, Australian government is not looking after Australian people. They're looking after getting themselves in power and big corporations. That's and all the backhanders, and the corruption is out of control in Australian politics now. It's so cooked. It's so cooked in Australia.
Yeah, and I know this is something you're super passionate about, and rightfully so, mate, because there's not enough people speaking out. And I just think that we're entering a time where these conversations, you can either choose to ignore them or you can choose to say, well, hey, this is a wake-up call. But what I want to do, Adam, is just sort of circle back to this conversation around Bitcoin as a freedom tool and why people should be paying attention to it now more than ever. What is it you think, you have a lot of very successful people you associate with. What would you say in percentage terms, if you could put your finger on it as a rough ballpark, what would you say in terms of all the people you know and the circles you hang around with? How many people would you say still don't understand Bitcoin? Would you say it's well over half? Would you say it's 80%?
Mate, yeah. Even people who own Bitcoin don't understand Bitcoin.
Yeah.
They've opened a CoinSpot account and they've bought Bitcoin, and because I said so, or you said so, or their cousin who seems smart said so, but they haven't really, really done the work and gone deep. Bitcoin is such an elusive thing. It's kind of everything that people don't know about money combined with everything they don't know about technology. And where they overlap is Bitcoin. So you can imagine how it's a really complex thing for people to understand just the basics. But it's one of those things that's worth learning, because what could be more important than learning how to store the economic expression of your life? There's very few things as important as that. And if you're a father or a mother and you're trying to provide for the future, learning about how to do that and make sure that your value is carried forward in time without leakage. So what I mean by that is, if you save $100,000, let's make it simple. If they go to work this week and you save $1,000 somehow, if you leave it in the fiat system, in 10 years, the $1,000 is going to buy a lot less. That's what we call leakage. It's like a battery that just sits there and does nothing but runs flat, right? It's not good storage technology. Good storage technology would be worth at least the same 10 years from now. But we've become just accepting of this fact that the government gets to print money and turn the pressure up ever so slightly. And this is what's happened with Australia and how it's changed Australia. Australia 30 years ago was a relaxed place. Dad could just go get a good job, buy a house, which is 3 or 4 times the annual income, and provide for a stay-at-home mum. Everybody won. Right? The kids got home, like you and I are from the generation where we got home from school and mum was waiting at the door. How was your day, boys? Like, I got you some cream buns, and we'd rush to the fridge and see what was there, right? And that was mum's kick for the day. And I remember she used to say to me, Addie, what do you wish was in the fridge when you got home? And that made a generation of people, right? Like, it was a beautiful time. That's all gone. Yeah. And that is an absolute loss. That is a net loss, that the family unit cannot operate like that anymore. Now it's so expensive that even if both parents work, they can't afford the childcare. Not only are the kids not getting the care from the mum, they can't afford the childcare that the third party provides. So and this is the decay of our life that we are seeing, but we're seeing it in slow motion, and we've normalized it. Now we've got men and women, young men and women hating each other because independent women and toxic men and all this. It's just all falling to shit. And it all comes back to the money's broken, right?
Yeah.
And if we didn't have that constant dial up through inflation, we wouldn't be in this position, but we are. And that's why money is so important, why it's worthy of people's time and energy. So there's a very long answer to the point. How many people understand Bitcoin? Very, very few.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I know you're a fan of Michael Saylor, like we all are, because he's been such a beacon of light, I guess, over the past 5 years in terms of really helping the broader world to understand what Bitcoin is. And one of the things that he says, one of the quotes I really love from Michael Saylor is that, the road to serfdom is defined as working exponentially harder for a currency that is growing exponentially weaker. And that's if you really contemplate that, essentially what he's saying is that everybody's out there working harder than they ever have before, right? Not realizing that the currency that they're exchanging their time and energy for, this Aussie dollar or US dollar or whatever it might be, it's getting weaker and weaker and weaker by the day. And so people are just toiling, like you were saying, Adam, we're like frogs in a boiling pot, slowly getting warmed up. Here we are 30 years on, not realizing or having these flashbacks to when we were kids, but we can't quite put our finger on what it is that's going wrong here. But essentially, there's the answer. It's that our currency is just getting weaker and weaker and weaker by the day, and we're all expected to get up and exchange our intellectual knowledge, our skill sets, our labor, our capital
Our
to
limited
generate,
life force,
yeah, our
this
limited
time that
life
we
force.
have on planet Earth. Like you've just had a grandson,
Mm,
that mother or father is going to literally have to spend time away from that child
mm,
because of money.
yeah,
And so when we reflect and we have nostalgia of the good old days, people go, oh, you just remember us. Go, no, they were better, right? They
yeah,
actually were better because mum could give you $1 and say, go down the shop. And then you would go down the shop and come home with a lolly bag that full. Now you'll get 2 frogs, or I don't even watch you. But this is the decay of society, and the government has got away with murder, literally just the ability to not work for money, but print money. And if you don't understand what proof of work network is, what proof of work means, you need to understand why proof of work is so important. Bitcoin is the only crypto in existence that is a proof of work network. Every other crypto is proof of stake. And you need to understand that. And you need to study the work by Jeff Booth. There's a phenomenal book called The Price of Tomorrow. And it's a real mind bender. The first time you read it, you need to read it 5 times if you have to. But it's basically you're building a building on a foundation that is like 2 degrees out. And to the untrained eye, you can't see it. But as you build that building, the building starts to go up like this. And the taller it goes, the more effed up it is. And more dangerous it becomes. You've got to work from the foundation. And that's what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is immutable foundation upon which to
mm.
build your future. The only issue is then time preference and being able to deal with the volatility.
Yeah. And I want to just push on that point a little further, Adam, because I'm a great fan of Jeff Booth as well, and I know you talk about him often. But just for the listener, Jeff Booth, when you really delve into the way he teaches Bitcoin in terms of insight and an intellectual understanding of what Bitcoin is, what he refers to as Bitcoin as being the world's first truly global free market. And it takes a while to get your head around that because we're under the illusion that we live in a free market in Australia,
Ugh.
right? And in the US. I mean, we've grown up, this is a free market capitalist society. But the thing that Jeff really hammers home so effectively is this point that the natural state of a free market is actually deflation. Okay. And once you get that, what it means is that over time, because of entrepreneurship, economies of scale, innovation, all of the things that a free market, that are hallmarks of a free market, that a free market does, right? We're getting better. We're getting more innovative. We're being more productive. We're creating more abundance. But none of that is flowing through to the population. right?
It's
And
actually the opposite.
and the question is why? Why is this happening? So when Adam says, back in the day, mum could stay home and make afternoon tea for the kids, well, we can't have that now. I mean, we should all be rejoicing all of this amazing technology. The fact that Adam and I were in simple, though we're in different countries, but we are in different parts of the world. We're able to have this conversation through the geniusness of technology. But when you actually look at the quality of everybody's life, for the most part, you start to realize that this insight that a free market is meant to give us more abundance, but it's actually giving us less, that really highlights how money is so broken because it's the inflation that's papering over all of this abundance that we otherwise should experience. Do you agree with that, Adam?
That's how skewed it is.
Mm,
And I know this is complex. I'm going to say it another way for the listener,
mm.
because this one took me a long time to really understand. Jeff says it in a way that's, he's so good with words that sometimes it just didn't get through. But if you put it in simple terms, growing apples, right, 50 years ago with no technology should be more expensive than growing apples today, given the advances in technology, the ability to be able to fly a drone over, and instead of having to go out there with a human being spraying everything, fly a drone over to spray the crops or identify where there's problems, and optimal nutrition and all the advances. We should be getting higher yield of apples from a lower effort, and I think everybody agrees with that. So why are apples now 10 times more expensive than they were 30 years ago, given that technology is 10 times better? And what Jazane is saying here is that this demonstrates how screwed up it is. Not only is it not getting cheaper, it's getting way more expensive. And you'll never know just how messed up it is because they keep flooding the system with new money. And that's the problem. And
Mm.
with Bitcoin, there is no new money flooding into the system. Completely transparent. It's global. It's not influenceable by any government. You can't shut it down. It is a global monetary settlement network that is completely free of all geopolitics, which is wild. And it's secured by billions and billions of dollars of infrastructure and energy every day. And so when people go, oh, you can't touch it, I'm like, when was the last time you really needed to touch money? You don't. With gold bugs, well, you can't do it. You can't eat gold. You can't eat cash. You can't eat Bitcoin. So
Yeah.
it's a long learning journey. But once you really went to the penny drops, it is absolutely superior to any other technology out there.
Yeah, and so just to kind of put a cap on that for you here, guys, when we talk about this abundance that we should be experiencing and that we're not experiencing, now there's a caveat to this, and that is that there are certain people that benefit greatly from inflation. Okay, and it's typically the top 5%, people who are very rich in assets. They benefit for a period of time from an inflationary system. It's a separate conversation for another day. But the point to understand is that for the most part, people who go out and try and earn an honest living, what they're finding is that their quality of life is gradually being eroded through this phenomenon known as currency debasement. The value of our currency is constantly being diluted. We didn't vote for it. There's a couple of unelected officials that make this monetary policy, and we just all have to wear it. Some of us benefit from it, but most of us don't. And so the implication is that our quality of life over time, if we're saving in those dollars, if we're saving in that currency that we're meant to trust, like the Aussie dollar, it's going down and down and down and down and down. And then we start to think about, well, what is the implication of this for the next generation? Now, I'm a father of three kids in their 20s, three girls in their 20s, and I've just had my first grandson. So if we start projecting this phenomenon out, Adam, for the next generation and then their kids, I mean, what hope do they have of living the great Australian dream? I mean,
Dude, if you saw the Australian dollar over 100 years, I think it's $1 100 years ago is worth 12 cents today or something, 5 cents today. So if you saw that as a stock, you'd go, what shitcoin is that? Or what terrible stock investment is that? It's the Aussie dollar. That's
yeah,
it.
yeah,
But where the trick is is that you don't see it that way. You see it the inverse is how they express it, right? They say things are going up. It's another way of saying actually just the dollar's going down. And the best way
Yep.
to experience that, if people who bought a house in COVID for 500,000 to live in, and it's now $1 million, did they get richer? No.
Not a, yeah.
Not in relative terms, because if they sell the house today, they can only get another one, which was the same at the same time. The only time they got richer is if they went and borrowed money from the banksters, put themselves into hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. And those were the investment homes outside of their principal place of residence, because then it's free money at the poker tables because they don't need to live in it. So the incentive structures in Australia are all designed around be in debt. That's it. Think about most Australians who've gotten ahead, real estate. The incentives are all lined up, real estate. It is no longer valued based on its utility. It's valued based on its investment value. That's why people buy homes. People don't need a second home other than to make money. And who makes money from that? Look at the government's tax base off real estate, stamp duty, rates, all the rest. And
Land
look
tax.
at the biggest banks in our four banks on a per share basis are in the top 10 globally in terms of value. So it's all around. Australia is a banking, a real estate addicted country. And the only way to get in ahead is to put yourself into enormous servitude and debt to the bank and hope that it doesn't pop.
So guys, what I really want you to think about here is Bitcoin as a savings technology. Now, I speak to people pretty much every week. People come to me, they want to get some clarity around getting into Bitcoin. A lot of people are looking to roll over their superannuation these days into an SMSF so that they're in control of their retirement account. In Australia, you've got to have an SMSF if you actually want to buy Bitcoin. You can't just ring up AMP or your fund manager and say, hey, this Bitcoin thing, can you throw some of that into my superannuation? You've got to actually take control of it. But the thing is with all of this, I think the name of the game for everybody, Adam, who's listening to this, who still isn't yet paying attention to Bitcoin, they've got to really understand that Bitcoin is incorruptible money, right? It is a monetary system that is fixed. It is decentralized, meaning there's no politician, there's no central banker, there's no board of directors, there's nobody who can change that monetary system. Now, that is very, very powerful when you think about preserving your savings, preserving your retirement account, rotating capital. If you're one of these people in a state like Victoria, as an example, who's got a vast rental property portfolio or commercial properties, and you're seeing these rates and land tax bills come in, the question is, what can you do to stop it, right? And I know you've spoken about this, Adam, in divesting all of your commercial properties, and you weren't even in Victoria, as I understand it, but you saw the writing on the wall, right? That now's the time to start getting out and rotating capital into a fixed and finite incorruptible form of money, which is what Bitcoin is. And is that really what you did?
I can see the writing on the wall. Like, where's the first place they come with their tin can? To the rich people. The rich people who own the property, right? And property's great for governments because you can't move it. It's there, right? Your property's sitting on Queensland land and you think it's your land? It ain't your land. Don't pay your rates notice and see how long you own the house. You are borrowing that land contingent upon you paying your rates and your other fees, which they're free to put up whenever they want. They're free to come after they tried to go after unrealized capital gains on super. It's only as their mismanagement of money is projected forward, there's only one place they're going to come for it, and it's going to be from where it's easiest to get, which is the rich private individuals and what they deem to be rich, right? And when they said $3 million makes you rich, and therefore we can steal from you or change the rules with you because most people haven't got 3 million. 3 million is not that much in Australia now. 7% return, it's $200,000 a year. You think that's going to be that much when you go into retirement in the future? It's not. So yes, I basically sold up all my buildings. I still own one property in Australia, like a $10 million commercial property, but everything, because I own it with somebody else, but everything else I sold. And I put a fair chunk of it into Bitcoin. But I think people should also pay attention to, other, opportunities that, For example, I have a fairly big bag of Tesla because I believe that we're on the precipice of huge changes in AI. And I think they're well positioned. So I think you've got to be strategic and try to look for a little bit of diversification into players that you think are going to benefit from the world that we're going into over the next 10 years. So, but yeah, I really do think property is not what it was in Australia. And it's gotten to a point where the numbers don't make sense to me anyway.
Yeah. So we've kind of spoken about Bitcoin as a store of value, but Adam, what I'd love to do on the back end of this conversation, if you're okay with it, is talk about the self-custody aspect of Bitcoin and why this is so important and why people should be paying attention and learning about self-custody as the next stage in their Bitcoin journey. Do you believe that it's possible to experience the freedom side of Bitcoin without learning about self-custody, or do you think they are one and the same thing?
Look, I think about this often, Zane, like because there are downsides to self-custody as well. And some people, it's always there's a scale here, right? Like, there's personalities involved, there's amounts involved, there's what you're doing in the world for a living, whether you live off grid and a quiet life or whether you're a public figure. Like I'm sort of a bit public more than I probably like to be these days. I don't like going to big Bitcoin conferences sometimes now because you realize there's increasing risk around that. So the self-custody is phenomenal, but you've got to be really willing to do the work. And a lot of people are not willing to learn truly how to take custody of, and especially if the number's bigger. Like if you've got a few $1 million in Bitcoin, it's a bit different to having $10,000 in Bitcoin, right? So you've really got to know what you're doing. But I think truly understanding self-custody and what, like you said, a distributed network, like people, if you don't understand what a Bitcoin node is and why Bitcoin nodes are such an integral part of the network, and if you don't understand how Bitcoin mining works, you don't really understand Bitcoin yet, right? And when you do understand it, you're like, holy crap, like this thing is actually incredibly valuable and absolutely remarkable when you understand what it is. And so I encourage people to jump onto Grok and say, I want to understand what a Bitcoin node is and why Bitcoin nodes are so important in having security. Like it's just a quick crash course for people. If you think of National Australia Bank, when you log in, what you're looking at is a ledger. This is how much National Australia Bank says you have of dollars. And then when you send it to someone else, the ledger gets updated. It gets deleted off your account and it gets credited on somebody else's account through a complex web of communications. But it's really just a ledger that the banks are keeping. But it's centralized on a National Australia Bank database and a Commonwealth Bank database, which is probably a server farm sitting somewhere, whereas the Bitcoin network is operated with a series of little silver boxes about this big called Bitcoin nodes. And there's hundreds of thousands of them all over the world. Some of them are run by kids in their, basement in Nigeria. And some of them are I've got one running in my home in Australia. I say I've still got a home there because it hasn't settled yet, but it's in there. And so when a transaction on the Bitcoin network occurs, it gets broadcast to the network and those nodes are all updated with the latest transactions. And so every 10 minutes worldwide, there's hundreds of thousands of copies of this ledger living in locations all over the world in all different jurisdictions that are secured by the Bitcoin mining network. And it's absolutely a remarkable community of freedom-minded people. And it just simply plugs into the back of your Wi-Fi router with just a one cord and in the plug, and it has the software in it. It just runs in the background. You don't even know it's there. But that ledger, as long as one of those nodes is operating somewhere in the world, there could be a power outage everywhere else, there's a full copy of the Bitcoin ledger on that node. It's absolutely extraordinary.
So what Adam's saying here, guys, is really speaking to what really drives the self-sovereignty side of the Bitcoin protocol, and that is these nodes, and really what their job is to verify and to authenticate or perform an audit, is probably an easier way to put it, to perform an audit on the Bitcoin blockchain to ensure at all times that if Adam and I are transacting with one another, that we are in fact setting real Bitcoin, that there's no double spending, that the rules, the Bitcoin protocol rules, are being actually verified and authenticated. And what's fascinating to me about this is it doesn't happen every quarter or every month or every week. It actually happens every 10 minutes. And so if you're running a node, and this is kind of, I wouldn't call it an advanced step, but I would definitely call it an evolutionary step that you take as a Bitcoiner. So you learn about self-custody, and that might begin by downloading a hot wallet on your phone, such as Aqua or Blue or Proton Wallet, something like that. And you just get used to the idea of moving Bitcoin from an exchange or from a brokerage to your own self-custody wallet. That might be step one. Step two might be to go and get yourself an air-gapped Bitcoin-only open source wallet, such as a Cold Card or a Foundation Passport or even a Trezor or something like that. Okay. And then you learn that and why that's important. Okay. And this is all probably relative to how much Bitcoin you have as to how fast you move down these steps. And then step three would probably be to go and start learning about running a node. And a node is this piece of software via this little server that Adam's referring to that plugs into your Wi-Fi router at home. And there's nothing you need to do once this is set up, is there, Adam? It just kind of functions in the background and operates 24/7, 365, but it's doing the job of verifying the authenticity or the Bitcoin rules every 10 minutes. And so it's a really powerful thing. And they refer to this in Bitcoin as consensus. This is what drives Bitcoin's ongoing freedom technology and its decentralization. So when you actually run a node, what actually you're doing is you're now an active participant in Bitcoin as a freedom technology. You are now actively participating in Bitcoin doing its job of continuing to preserve that economic energy and that value that that you put into it.
I want to share one quick story, Zane, that just might bring home the importance of this to people in a real sense. There was a Nigerian woman who was in a domestic violence situation, and she was an engineer getting paid in Bitcoin or partially in Bitcoin by her employer who knew the situation. And because of that, when she left, the first thing the husband tried to do was stop her bank account. Guess what? Not a problem for this woman. She walked out because she had Bitcoin. And there's many stories like this. And you can get a Bitcoin, you've got your cold storage, you can get a credit card connected to your Bitcoin. And this provided literal exit from domestic violence and personal freedom because she had permissionless money technology.
Yeah.
And and it's not just government sometimes, it's partners. It's abusive men and women, right? So that's how sovereign it is, where the man couldn't just ring the bank and say, I'm the man, stop her bank account. She was able to walk out with all her economic power. And that's so powerful. And once you run the node, you also get to broadcast your own transactions from your private node that can run on a Tor browser. So that's a whole nother thing. But Grok is your friend here, or ChatGPT. Just get it to teach you. Say, I'm a real novice, brand new. Explain how a Bitcoin node works. Explain it to me. Explain how a cold card works, or talk to the Bitcoin way. I mean, I know you do work with them. I hired them to teach me this stuff, and they were phenomenal. They told me what to buy. They sat with me on one-on-one calls like this. They helped me set it all up. And at the end of it, I just knew everything right through to my inheritance.
Yeah. How much of a transition was that for you, Adam, from your previous setup to working with the Bitcoin way? Was that a real eye-opener for you?
It was. And it was daunting, if I'm honest, because I built quite a big stack, right? Like when I say a big stack, I built a big bag of Bitcoin over the years, right? Because I've been buying it since 2017 or 18 or something. And I just keep buying it. I bought it at I think the highest I paid was 120 recently, but I've been buying it since it was 20, right? So I bought a few $1 million back then when it was around those times. So I bought it as low as, $1,000 and all the way up to 120 and then now back to 90 and sort of in between all the way. And when I dealt with the Bitcoin way, I built this stack and I had a multi-key setup, meaning that, I had a custodial partner, so a professional company that is a service provider, and I have a 5-key wallet. So there's, 3 of the keys have to sign any outbound transactions. So anyway, that's what I had set up. Collaborative custody, right?
Yeah.
And it was perfect. But it still relied on me relying on that third party I mean, I could still move it on my own, but it's still for the benefits I wanted, they were still involved. And they would know what my Bitcoin stack is as well. They've got visibility into my things. I don't have the privacy. But when it comes to it, and then you've set this self-custody up, and you're like, shit, if I move all this Bitcoin into my self-custody now, like it's on me, right? Like I've got to really know this system. And so I did drills and practices and emergency recovery protocols and making sure I had redundancies and all this stuff. But in exchange now, like if I'm in Indonesia at the moment, and I've been to so many countries this year, but if something happened anywhere I am and I had to walk out of here right now with nothing, literally, my computer, I have to leave my cold card here, like all that was gone. I could be up and economically viable in any country in the world if I lost my computer and everything. And as long as it takes to buy another computer and log in, and then I'm
Yep.
back online and get my next cold card, I'm good to go, you know?
Mm.
So that's very powerful. And to know that no matter where I go, no bank can stop me, and no bank can make an onward forward call saying, this guy, Adam, don't bank him. Can't happen. You know, I was speaking to Tommy Robinson after he did the UK rally, and he said, I need to go have a holiday. And he jumped on a plane and he went to South America. They arrested him in the airport because the UK rang ahead and said, don't let the guy in. He's been painful to us. So they just put him in and said, we're deporting you. And then he went to Panama and they arrested him until the mayor of Panama found out and went down and personally pulled him out. But this is what governments can do, is that, you know, they can mess with you. So Bitcoin just like, no, I'm out. See ya. I'm good. I don't need your permission for anything. I don't need your banks. People say to me in Cyprus, aren't you worried about the banks? I'm like, bank? What do I worry about banks? I don't use banks. Why would I? Right. So it's a different world when you get a little bit further down the road.
So, Adam, if we're just to kind of distill this for the listener who, you know, has probably heard quite a bit of Bitcoin content, maybe just trying to figure out what the next steps might be, but what would your advice be? You know, is it to go and read another book? Is it to listen to another couple of podcasts? What do you recommend people do who are kind of not quite sure whether this is the way forward for them?
If they're Australians, I'll just put it in this way. Go to CoinSpot. Are they the best exchange in the world? No, they're not. They're kind of expensive. But just get all that poverty stuff out of your head. Oh, how much transaction fee and blah, blah. Just go to CoinSpot, open an account, put in your driver's license and your KYC information, know your customer rules, open a crypto account, transfer money in. You'll get your first lesson that you don't own your money, because the bank will probably say, we're not transferring money to CoinSpot because they're a crypto. We don't agree with crypto, and you have to go through all this security bullshit. Straight away, you'll learn, oh, shit, I thought I could spend my money on what I wanted to. You'll learn you can't if you're Australian. If you can figure out and get past the security police at the bank, you'll then have money in your crypto account. Now buy Bitcoin. Okay, I've got Bitcoin. Okay, boom, there it is on the CoinSpot screen. Buy $1,000 worth, because a lot of people think I've got to buy a whole Bitcoin. Bitcoin's too expensive. It's 150,000 Australian or whatever it is. Don't worry, that's a whole other discussion. You can buy, $2 a Bitcoin if you want. Just go and buy $500, whatever, buy it. Because then you're going to go, oh, okay, so there's Bitcoin in my account. And then go and buy a cold storage device. Like, you mentioned what I think is the best one, which is the cold card, because it's Bitcoin only. It's not got any other vulnerabilities that are opened up when it has to try to cater to all these other cryptos. It's built only for Bitcoin and it's air gapped. So buy a cold card and learn using Grok and using YouTube videos, how do I send the Bitcoin into another wallet that's open source, right? And I use Sparrow. So on my computer, how do I get it off the exchange into Sparrow? And how do I move it from Sparrow to someone else using my cold card signing device? And if you can make that a project, even with your kids over the course of a month, at the end of it, you'll be so much smarter than you were at the start. And you'll be like, oh my God, I can move this money around. And if you use Sparrow, you can see how quickly do we want to move it, guys? Do we want to move it do we want to pump it to the front of the line so the miners, process this quickly? Yeah. Or do we just want to let it get done sometimes in the next 10 minutes? And you'll see if you slide it up, the time goes down and the price goes up. So it's just telling you, right there, and why are you paying the miners? Because they're the ones with the energy input cost. They're running electricity to process it. So you have to pay, but you're paying a miner, you're not paying a bank. And you start to learn all this stuff, and it's so interesting. And you get smarter. And once you see it with small stakes, you go, oh my God. And then you look and compare it with banks or gold or any of that. I mean, I was speaking on Kuala Lumpur at the Nomad Capitalist event, and they put me on stage to argue with two gold people. One ran a big gold storage business, an Israeli guy, and the other woman ran a gold brokerage. And they were saying, gold's better for this and this and this reason. And I said, all right, well, let me ask you a question. If I put $1 million of gold into your vault, are you going to KYC me? And they said, yes. I said, all right. What if the government calls you up and says, Adam's been a naughty boy, don't let him have his gold? And I ring up and say, I want my gold. Who are you going to listen to? And they said, well, we have to comply with the government. Correct. So you are between me and my gold stack and the government's. First of all, you don't offer me self-custody. And if I want to move that $1 million to my mate Tony here from the Bitcoin Way, who was in the audience, I want to send that $1 million. How long in advance do I have to book the removal of my gold bars? What insurance do I have to have in place? What services do you offer to help people move $1 million across the world? And how much is it going to roughly cost me? And it worked out, it'll be like 15 or 20 grand to move my gold. Not to mention, I have to spend 1% a year of the value of the gold, which is 10 grand a year, for him to just sit it on a shelf. So he gets paid 10 grand a year of my wealth. So it's a wealth tax. The more I have, the more he gets. All this bloat and infrastructure. And I said, mate, I could move $1 million of my Bitcoin to Tony and have it settled on chain in 10 minutes for like 22 cents. Right now, Tony would know that he's got it. I would know that it's gone, and we'd pay a miner 22 cents. And I can never have a government pressure somebody in the middle. So why would I go with you? And the crowd was just like, holy shit.
Standing ovation.
Yes. And people were like, and I said, that's freedom money. It's, and when you understand how the Bitcoin network works and who's getting paid in that transaction, it makes total sense, because these guys have to run those machines, and that's the input cost, that's the energy.
Mm-mm.
And it's paid for voluntarily as a commercial business. But those miners are all over the world. So you don't have like governmental influence with the banks and all the rest. And people say, well, what happens if the governments pressure the miners? I interviewed Prince Philip of Serbia, who's a massive Bitcoiner. I said, Prince, when did you know Bitcoin was special? He said, when China banned Bitcoin mining. I said, why is that special? Because he said, on that day, 40% of the Bitcoin mining power in the world, what they call hash rate, was shut down, right, within a week. And what happened to Bitcoin? Nothing. All the miners did was unplug the machines, move to another country, and kept going. The Bitcoin network did not miss a single beat. Now think about what would happen if you could shut down 40% of the banking power in the world. It just collapsed. There'd be a financial crisis.
Yeah.
So it's a very, very special technology that I'm, as you can see, deeply excited about, because it restores sovereignty, honesty, freedom to speak your mind, freedom to be yourself without that little fear of, I don't want to poke the bear. Fuck the bear.
Yeah. And I hear you too, Adam, often say that Bitcoin now is no longer an IQ test. It's now an ego test.
Yes.
Maybe as we get to the back end here, why is Bitcoin really about overcoming your ego and whatever mental blocks you might have around this?
Well, simply put, the fact is, and the score is on the board at this point. This is not a new asset. It's not up for debate whether Bitcoin has been a successful piece of technology or investment. In fact, it has been, of the last 17 years, it has been the best performing asset in the world for 12 of the last 17 years. That's not subjective opinion, it's fact. And it's not fact by a little bit, it's fact by a country mile. And I can hear the gold bugs right now. It's like, well, not in 2025. I'm actually happy for the gold people, because gold people and silver people share many of the principles of Bitcoin people. But in reality, this has been the best year on record ever in thousands of years of gold's history, right? Great. Congratulations to those who own it, because people who own it for very similar reasons to what we own Bitcoin. But it's not up for debate. Your Uncle Doug at the barbecue who's broke doesn't matter, right? Oh, it sounds like a scam. Oh, it's fake internet money. You're an idiot, right? The biggest players in the world. Harvard University famously just 5 years ago said Bitcoin is more likely to go to zero than $100,000. This year, they bought, I think it was 100 million of Bitcoin at $100,000, right? They are one by one bending the knee as they do the work and come to understand what Bitcoin is. And so right now that there's lots of guys, men particularly, no, Bitcoin's a scam. You can't touch it. What kind of thing is that? That's just, and they feel good and they just sound really dumb to smart people, right? And they forget the White House pro Bitcoin, pretty much the entire leadership. JD Vance has something like 40 or 50% of his net worth or more in Bitcoin. David Sachs, big Bitcoiner. Donald Trump, big Bitcoiner. It's all there, right? America has bet on the digital future. So at this point, it's just you holding on to your old ideas while Bitcoin rips your face off your property returns, your gold returns, your S&P returns. Stay confident and stupid for as long as you want, but being loud doesn't make you right. It doesn't.
Yeah. And I've got a saying, Adam, which I don't know where I came up with it, but I often say, people are going to come to Bitcoin either by choice or by force, because I think there's going to come a time where people start to realize, now, if you're a high net worth individual and you think you don't need Bitcoin, what's the time at which you are likely to come to Bitcoin? Probably once, there's surveillance over your wealth, or you got limitations on how much you can withdraw, or they start taxing your real estate to death, or whatever it might be. Maybe then, but I do think we're going to enter this kind of crossroads moment, or this inflection point, where people are going to be forced to pay attention to Bitcoin regardless of which end of the socio-economic spectrum we're at. Would you agree with that?
Yep. My friend Lawrence Lapard said, we're in a movie theater and smoke is starting to creep in, and sooner or later someone's going to yell fire and there's going to be a run for the exits. The question is, what are the exits? When your money is collapsing, what are the exits? And, we've lived in a time where we haven't seen a changing of the monetary guard for most people. We've lived where the US dollar has been the reserve. But don't forget, this is an experiment, right? This is an experiment where the government gave up the gold-backed methodology and went into money printing. And it's now been 50 years that this experiment has gone on, a bit more than 50 years, or coming up around 50 years. But it's an experiment. And historically, every time, not most of the times, every time this has happened, the currency has failed. That's why we've gone from different global reserve currencies throughout time. The US dollar took over from the Brits because the Brits went bank in the war. And so then the Americans came along and they're the next one in line. Before that was the Brits, and before that there was someone else, and before that there was someone else. The Roman Empire, it collapsed when they started diluting the money. They started, getting their gold and putting lead or whatever else they put in it. It's a story as old as time. And when they yell fire is when they're going to look for the exits. And the question is, what is the exit? And in my mind, I look at it and go, here in the blue corner, or the orange corner probably, we have a monetary network that is secured globally without any government intervention, without any politics, that is secured by energy, that can be settled every 10 minutes on chain, immutably, transparently, and it just works. And that, I think, is an extremely powerful contender for significant stores of wealth, whether it becomes the transaction layer or whether it just becomes the digital store of value. As Michael Saylor says, digital capital. That's what Bitcoin is. It is digital capital. And it's just learning, to deal with the volatility. But even the volatility is expressed in this funny money called US dollars or Aussie dollars, which are fugazi. You really don't know how much there is because every day they're printing billions more, literally. Globally, there's billions of dollars printed every day into the fiat money systems. So you're measuring it in something that's just like...
Yeah, there's no checks and balances.
Like you can lose weight by going to the moon, but you have to change, like you're dealing with a different gravitational measuring stick, right? So whereas Bitcoin, one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin. That's it. It'll never change. And each of those Bitcoins is subdivided into Satoshis, and that's it.
Mm.
So I think young people listening to this, and that's the other hope that is on the horizon. Yes, young people don't have access to housing, but you have access to Bitcoin under 100 grand. And if we're right, in time, your kids are going to go, holy shit, no wonder mum and dad are rich. You were around when Bitcoin was like $88,000. Jesus, any idiot could get rich back then, right?
Yeah.
When Bitcoin's 1.6 million per coin or 2 million per coin, which I believe is coming.
Yeah. No, I agree. And this is, why I, Adam, have been really resolute with my kids, like I said, in their 20s. And I've said, forget buying a house, right? Although my oldest, she got into the housing market with her partner a few years ago. She's one of the fortunate people of her age group who are able. Most of her friends have got no hope. But the point is that I've said to the other two, I said, forget buying a house. What you should be doing is learning about Bitcoin and getting yourself to 10% of a Bitcoin, zero point 0.1. Just set something as a bit of a target for yourself, and just whatever you can put away every fortnight, week, month, whatever it might be, and just set yourself that goal and gradually get there. The reason for that is because they've got time on their side. And, if you look at Bitcoin's compound annual growth rate historically, and you start projecting that out, even if it trends at 20% less or 30% less than its CAGR. I don't think it's going to do that for lots of reasons, but even if it was to do half of its historical compound growth rate, they're still going to be light years ahead of all of their peers in 12 to 15 years time, and so while everyone's got a probably by that stage they'll have a 50-year mortgage around their neck instead of a 30, right, with this 5% deposit scheme, our kids should be able to, if they want to, pay cash for a house because they've done the smart thing. Mate, we could talk all day. I really appreciate your time. I've just got two final questions for you. Number one, will you ever stop buying Bitcoin?
Oh, look, I don't know. I mean,
You feel like you've got enough and there's no need to stack anymore, or is it just something that you feel like you just have to keep doing?
if I look at my investing activity over the last 3 or 4 months, I've been buying a lot of Tesla stock because I've been going down that rabbit hole. And I still think that it's wise to have a few things going. So I still also own real estate. I just bought 15% of a hotel here in Bali on the beachfront. I have other projects. I'm building a home here. So there's still, I think, something to be said for diversity. My hotel investment should return about 18% per annum, which basically means I get my money back in 5.5 years, and it's on a freehold 99-year lease that will be renewed pretty much automatically at the end of the 100 years, but I'll be dead by then anyway. But basically, I get 5 years, I get all my capital back. I invested $1 million. So in 5 years, I get my million back, and then I get 18% return. And it's indexed to inflation because the hotel will put its prices up as time goes by, right? So I own that. I have a large caravan park in Australia with 200 tenants, mostly full time. So I have other assets outside of it, and I still think it's wise. But the alpha asset in my portfolio is Bitcoin for so many reasons. It never calls me. It never tells me it's got a leaky roof. It never gives me an excuse that the rent's late. I had all sorts of commercial tenants, from churches to gyms to all sorts of shit. And I just had enough of it. I was like, get the out of my life. And now it's like, I've got this asset that just sits there and does its thing. And all I have to do is just not be attached to the outcome in the short term. And so I think it's a phenomenal asset. I think what you're telling your kids to do is great. I think Elon Musk is the investor, is the businessman of our decade, and it would be silly not to invest in him. And I think there's some other things like Alphabet and some of those companies that are going to benefit from the AI boom. And I think having some exposure to those large blue chips that are standing right in the way. Amazon, I think, for example, I think robotics is going to add huge tranches of cash to their bottom line, which is going to result in shareholder growth. So I think there's something to be said for, like, there's a great channel called Invest Answers, which is a really good basic education in stock investing, but specifically growth stock investing. So I think learning some of these things, having a good Bitcoin allocation, and then depending where you are in life, at my age, at 52 and retired, I want to I want my day-to-day income to come off real estate, because real estate is just, people are always going to want to go on holiday somewhere. They're always going to need a house to live in. It's really predictable. but I'm in a different position. I'm 52. I'm not as interested in the capital growth off that investment. I'm interested
Yep.
in the 18% indexed
Yep.
income, right? And
Yep.
so, yeah, it depends where you are. There's not one size fits all, but definitely, I think Bitcoin growth. You can't. What you can't do is just leave it in the hands of a super fund and let those
Hope
morons
for the
manage it
best.
at half the growth rate of inflation, because you're just going to die. And you can't
Yep.
just borrow money and wait and hope anymore with real estate. You've got to be ahead of the game to do that if you're trying to grow your wealth. I've grown my wealth. So if I'm growing my wealth, don't own your home. Invest your money into Bitcoin and growth stocks or growth real estate. If you've got some inside track on how to add value and create value through real estate, and just, keep all of your money invested and live as affordably as you can, is my opinion. Live at home with mum and dad for as long as you can. Move to Bali or Dubai and get some tax effective structure. Keep your living costs low. Work hard, invest hard. And then when you get to 50, you can retire.
Yep. No, I love that. And maybe next year, mate, at a suitable time, we can get into this other side of things, which is where you see Bitcoin going with the parallel economy, Plan
Yeah.
B, why many, Aussies are starting to move abroad and all of that.
Get
One
yourself into
final
a
question.
jurisdiction where you don't have capital gains tax if you do want to sell it one day. That's a huge plus. A mate of mine he's a big Bitcoiner. He just came back to Australia at age 40, bought an $18 million shopping centre, right? At age 40, because he was able to grow his wealth pretty much tax-free, sell it all pretty much tax-free, and move back to Australia and live his
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. And I think you've said that before, compound your wealth outside. And then if you choose to come back, you're going to be
Yeah.
in a pretty powerful position. One final question, Adam. What would be the top 3 people to listen to or resources other than yourself and me that people should be tuned into? Who are your favorites?
Look, I think a great starting point for people is the Bitcoin Standard by Safety Namus. Fantastic book. So read that. But podcasts and voices in the space, I think Jeff Booth is really good. He's very intellectual though, very chewy. I think he's great. Michael Saylor's great. Anthony Pompliano does some great stuff. There's so many voices. The algorithm will create an echo chamber for you as soon as you start listening to those guys. And Jack Mullers is fantastic as well. He's
Yeah.
young and he's dynamic. So listen to Jack as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, mate. Thank you so much. Is there
My
any
pleasure.
final words you want to leave the audience with, where they can find you if they have been living
Yeah.
under a rock and they don't know where you are?
My Instagram first, which is just Adam Hudson Official, and our podcast, which is Unemployable. And I do a show a week on Bitcoin as well. Speaking of which, you're probably due to come back on my show, mate, and get your thoughts on things. But look, final thoughts for people is understand that there is a war afoot for your future, and it is being fought slowly and silently through inflation. And so if you want to win and you want to get ahead, you're going to have to outperform inflation and monetary debasement. In my opinion, that means you need to invest in things that are growing north of 10%, probably north of 12% a year, which means the average stock market return and the average real estate returns are not going to get it done for you. So you have to get serious about it. If you're serious about financial freedom, you have to get hard at it.
Yeah, that's a great note to end the day's show. Adam, thank you so much for you listening. I really appreciate you tuning in. If you've listened this far, like I said, please leave a comment, please like, share, and most importantly, please subscribe. And that just helps us to support the work that I'm doing, grow the channel, and all that good stuff. You've been listening to Bitcoin with ZT, where real conversations meet real conviction. Have a great one.